introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
We're good to go. We're good to go.
Wonderful.
Hey,
How are
Angela, I've got
you?
all of your, there you go, get organized. I've got all of your bio and background and so forth, and we've talked a couple times, including with your wonderful partner, Elise.
Wonderful.
But, you know, let's start with a little bit of your background in history. You have, to a great extent, grown up in the advisory niche, doing in-house marketing and development and so forth. So, you know, give us all a little bit of your background from that standpoint, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm excited for our conversation. I stumbled into the advisor marketing world by accident. I was a marketing major, communications major out of college, went straight into the advertising industry. I worked at an agency. I was working in healthcare advertising, and I was asked to join an advisory firm in the late 90s to help with event logistics and marketing logistics, because by nature, I'm just very linear and logical and planning all the marketing pieces. And so they said, you'd love it. And I said, I don't know anything about the industry. They said, try it, come on over. And I haven't turned back. It's been great. I was in-house at an advisory firm for almost a decade, managing their marketing division, which was not only client communications, but working with COIs, centers of influence, and really bridging those two pieces of marketing that really help an advisory firm. And it was in 2008, for many different circumstances, that I ended up going off on my own and consulting, and I've stayed in the industry as an advisor marketing consultant ever since. And what that looks like is working with marketing plans, developing the marketing plans, bringing those plans to life, and then executing on all the details and bringing in the different partners needed to execute that.
You bet. You bet. Yeah. Let's go back to your work, you know, decades long at the firm. And, you know, to start with, let's say out loud what we both know is advertising is advertising, marketing is marketing. And, you know, my background educationally is in this niche basically, but I spent a lot of years running and marketing martial arts schools, which,
Right.
you know, to a lot of people seems like a real, you know, out there in left field. But what they need is they need to attract new clients. They need to have a smooth sales process to get them engaged. They need to maximize their lifetime value of a client. They need to retain a client and then enhance the referrals and the multi-generational impact, same as a financial advisor
Right.
does. And
Right.
the so I kind of came full circle to my intended field after being very aggressive in marketing in that field, and then being begged and asked to, kind of like you were in the early stages, to come back into both
Right.
law firms, financial advisors, and so forth, and then decided to specialize with financial advisors. But talk a little bit about what your experience was with them on the client communications. What were you doing with client communications? What were they doing when you came in? What did you enhance over the years?
Well, we're talking a span of almost 25 years, and client communications, or communications in general,
Mhm.
have evolved, as we all know,
Sure.
with the technology. You know, back then we had fax machines, and we were just dabbling in the email. So it's evolved as life has evolved.
Sure.
So back then, I lost my screen. I don't see you. There you go. You good.
There you go.
So back then, the communications were really not well thought out.
Mhm.
They were very shoot from the hip almost.
Right,
We
right.
want to communicate this, let's do it. Let's,
Mm.
want to say this. And a lot of times too, we were very constrained. One of the things that has changed in 25 years is compliance.
Sure.
So when you look at client communications in the late 90s, early 2000s versus now, we have a lot more leeway now with compliance. So in my opinion, having gone through that whole evolution, the communications weren't very targeted. They
Mhm.
were there for the sake of being there.
Right.
I don't feel they moved the relationship forward as it could have. It was
Mhm.
definitely not strategic.
Right.
And it was very regulated. So now, fast forward, we have different modalities that we can communicate. We have the social media, we have the email. We didn't have social media back then in the capacity we have now. And we can really reach clients and prospects how they want to be communicated to.
Right.
So 25 years ago, if we sent an email, that's what we did, whether or not the client was on email or not. And that was a struggle when you had an older client, especially then, that may not be on email and they're not receiving the communications,
Yeah.
or they didn't want a long newsletter. Now we have the choice and the knowledge to be able to communicate with the clients how they want to receive it. And in the work that I do now with my business partner, Elise Sterner, who you spoke to the other day,
Mhm.
is we work with the advisors to interview ideal clients, to understand their preferences, and we convey that to the advisors so that if the client wants to receive the main amount of their communications by text, that's what we advise.
Mhm.
Whether the advisor wants to text or not, as long as it's all approved. They may want small bite-sized pieces of content. They may want visuals. They may want to receive everything on social media or email. I mean, there's just so many different modalities now that we can utilize. And if we strategically plan the client communications, keeping in mind how the client wants to be communicated, then it's a win-win. You are reaching them and meeting them where they're at, and they will respond.
Yeah, yeah. And to unpack that even a little bit more is it seems like, I mean, I don't know how many advisors I've worked with now. I have a lot of them, but there almost nobody starts with what are we trying to accomplish, right? Is they think, well, we need to communicate with our clients. Well, why? What specifically are you trying to accomplish? What's your mechanism for doing that? And then the other element is they seem to have a predisposition of how they want to do it. And, a lot of the advisors that we probably both work with are like 50 to 60, been in the industry for a long time and have come, I guess, full cycle where they think that email is the only mechanism available and seem to have a resistance to, for instance, text messaging. And I wrote a book on internet marketing in 1999. And, the famous movie, You've Got Mail, back then, I loved email, people sat in anticipation waiting for their email. Now, most people get like 200, 250 emails a day. And I have kids. I have a daughter who's graduating from college and I have a son who's in high school. They don't use email. They use email only when forced to. And they don't use their telephone. They use text message.
I have one of those too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I was very proud of her. My daughter actually now, her voicemail on her telephone basically is the same as mine, which is, don't call me. Why aren't you texting me? And so it seems like there's maybe it's generational, but a predisposition that email is the best way to communicate with people, which it seems like on both ends of the spectrum, it's not dead, but it's dying a slow and painful death, in my estimation. And then on the other side, most importantly, what you addressed is why. What's the why? What are we trying to accomplish? And when I work with somebody, I say, well, let's start with referrals. So if you have somebody you sold an annuity to 3 years ago and you haven't communicated with them regularly since, of course, you're not going to get any referrals, but you're
Right.
also not going to get any additional business. They're just gone. They forgot who you are, right? So part of the communication, even if you're meeting with somebody face to face twice a year to do updates and reviews, part of it is about when they're in a situation where a friend, business associate, family member need your services, for you to be top of mind, right? So
Absolutely.
therefore, I need to be in some way in front of you every week, preferably more often than that. Ideally, I'd like to have your book on their desk. I'd like to have a postcard you just sent them, an invitation you just sent them, you're in their email box, etc. So if one category is to generate referrals, and then another category is to maintain their business and expand, I was privy to an internal review that was done by Northwestern Mutual for their private client group. And their data was approximately 60% of clients of advisors aren't particularly impressed with their current person.
Right.
And that a third of them were
Absolutely.
thinking about leaving.
Or
and
they
they would.
diversify.
Yeah. Well, yeah, or they're giving this person a little bit, this person a little bit,
Yeah.
this person a little
Yeah.
bit, and right. And to me, those are pretty stark. I mean, now most advisors year over year turnover really isn't that much, but if I'm in the 60% who's not that impressed with you, not you personally, but their advisor, I'm sure not going to be rushing out to recruit my friends for you. I'm certainly not going to be thinking, well, my business works with a lot of people who needs this. How could we work together? They're not going to be thinking those things. And then on the other side of the communication is the expanding and developing that relationship with the client. And so one of the things I know that you do extensively with your clients, but it's the first thing I ask them is, how are we going to do communication to stay top of mind? How are we going to enhance that to generate referrals? How are we going to enhance that to do multi-generational? How are we going to enhance that from them going to be neutral to not thinking about you to impressed and excited about you? And then you have the prospect side of that again. And I've played prospects with hundreds of advisors now, and I'm shocked at how sloppy and pitiful they are. There's exactly one guy. Their firm name is Townsend. They're not a client of mine. I wish they were actually, but I opted into their website, and now at least 3 times a month I'm getting something in the mail. I'm getting invitations to their golf outing, their something else outing, whatever it is. I'm getting regular educational updates, invites to webinars, and so forth. But that's the other element of that communication is getting to somebody and getting them a little bit interested. It seems like most advisors think, I'm going to get a referral. They either meet with me or they don't. They either buy from me or they don't. And then they revert to 10-3-1, right? I'm going to get 10 referrals. 3 of them are going to meet with me. One's going to buy. But then they forget about all the others. So you got 9 people here who might be a great prospect in a month, 3 months, 5 months. They might listen to your podcast, read your book, follow up with your emails, but they totally forget about them and then abandon them. Or they farm out to, we both appreciate Snappy Kraken. I mean, they got some great systems, but just putting somebody in a forever email drip system isn't the same as intelligently crafting a follow-up system.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It needs to be tailored. It needs to be authentic. And there's quite a bit in what you said. And my brain was spinning. Oh, we need to talk about this and
that could be an 8-hour conversation.
Right. There's a couple pieces there. One is you were talking about how email is dying a slow death, and yes, it is. However, it meets certain demographics where they're at. I prefer email for certain things as opposed to
Sure.
text, because then I can save it and I can refer back to it because I get so many texts that gets lost. But if you're hitting the younger generation, maybe the adult children of your clients, they want text or they want it on social media. So you really have to, it can't be one size fits all. So you need to layer the different modalities that reach all the different clients and prospects you're trying to target.
You bet.
So So in our plans that we develop, we'll look at social media, we'll look at email marketing, we may look at text marketing, we'll look at blogs, we may look at speaking engagements, and really the first place we start after we deliver a marketing plan is we work with the advisor to segment their list.
You bet.
You segment it because you're not going to send one email blast to hit everybody, because if
No.
you have, let's say you have 2 ideal clients and you're working with pre-retirees and also college planning families.
Yeah.
The college planning family is not thinking about retirement, and the retirement family, unless they have grandkids going into college, does not want to they don't want to hear the college planning,
Yeah.
advice. You have to be really targeted, and you have to layer those different strategies to really have the 1-2 punch,
Yeah.
to really reach them where they're at. And there also is a fine line, as you were saying, when you were subscribing and then you're receiving all of this communication. When we interview ideal clients of each advisor, and every advisor's clients are different,
Mhm.
there's a point where too much is too much and they're going to unsubscribe, and that's off-putting. So that's
Yeah.
you really have to look at the whole picture and who you're trying to reach. And to circle back to where we were a few minutes ago, talking about client communications and how it's evolved over the last 25 years. Up until, so right now, I work with Elise and we do strategic marketing planning. And prior to the pandemic, which is when we met,
Mhm.
I was consulting and doing marketing plans with advisors based on templates and recommendations that came from coaches, that came from compliance, and everybody did, or the advisory firms were doing their marketing the same way every year, and we were implementing them, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't work.
Yeah.
And when I started to learn more about the strategy, event strategy and marketing strategy, and putting that into play with what we were doing in the advisor world, which there was nothing strategic about it.
No.
It's turning it up on its head, which is why we developed custom strategic marketing for wealth advisors, is because there's nothing like that. There's not a process that really looks at who you're trying to target and speak to them directly, and then build the marketing based on that. And what was happening prior to the pandemic is, an advisor would do a great party, do a great event, and then, okay, well, is this worth the $5,000 we spent, or we didn't get any prospects, or they didn't bring anybody, or I didn't get any business from it, and then say, oh, my marketing failed. Well, your marketing can work if you're reaching the right people.
Yeah.
If you're a vegetarian and you go into a steakhouse and they don't have any vegetarian meals, you're not going to return back. So it's you need to speak to the people that are listening.
You bet. Well, and to give a different example, I mean, if you're niched and you're working with dentists, and then you're also working with maybe people who share your hobby. I've seen advisors who dominate the fly fishing market of all things. But then you want to target your communication based upon you're the expert for dentists, or you're the expert for plastic surgeons, or one thing or another. And then if it's off message, it falls on deaf ears, and in fact does damage to what you're trying to accomplish. The other thing I see, and of course this is endemic in the industry, like in LinkedIn. I think I'm connected with 14,000 advisors in LinkedIn or something like that. All of them post the same crap. It all looks the same.
Don't get me started.
Oh my God. And every profile picture looks the same. I stole from Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you ever read The 4-Hour Workweek. But he had the typification of, the old fat bald guy in the red BMW convertible. But we've come to think of advisors as they're all the guy in the JCPenney suit sitting behind an oak desk. They all everything's the same. And especially the captive guys who are in the bigger companies, 9,000 people are all sharing the same crap, written by 3 lawyers, and somebody who's 23 years old, just graduated with a marketing degree, has no idea how to make a sale. And it's just pathetic, the state of that. And I'm sure you found that as well, is advisors generally, and you said it, what you were finding pre-pandemic, they're all following the same plan, right? They're following a plan, one that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't work. They're usually focused in on pure belly to belly, face to face sales with kind of begging for referrals. And then maybe they're doing some dinner meetings and buying somebody a steak. Maybe one or two other things, as you had mentioned before, circle of influence. So they try to get a couple CPAs or attorneys lined up. Talk about that when you were doing circle of influence marketing, what you found early on in your career, and then how that evolved.
Early on in my career working with the centers of influence, it really looked a lot different for a variety of reasons. One was prior to 2008, a lot of advisory firms, and the one that I was with specifically, there were large budgets. So we could take the time to take them to a Lakers game, to have box seat, to get the transportation to go to a private event, to do these big dinner events.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books, and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
And they were very well received. They're big parties and they were great networking events. But as time evolved and we've been through 2008 and then the pandemic, and everyone's really looking at where they're spending their marketing dollars, the strategy that really is working and taking hold now with your centers of influence is building those relationships on a one-to-one rather than a one-to-many. Yeah. Because you're building the know, like, trust, and that can be implemented in a couple of different ways. And again, just as we create a ideal client avatar, an ideal client marketing plan, we also do, depending on if it really works within the model of the advisory firm we're speaking with, we'll do an ideal COI referral partner plan. How do you clone your ideal referral partners? Who's giving you the business? Where's it a two-way street where you might be referring to them, but they're not referring to you? And we work to clone them. Where are they? Are they in your networking groups? Are they in your children's groups? Where are they? So that's what we look to.
Yeah. And it seems to me that the mistake the advisor makes in those, well, in every business makes the same mistake, right, is thinking that the person on the other side is going to do their share and is going to be capable of doing marketing, advertising, communication, referrals, and especially when you start talking about categories like accountants and lawyers. I mean, if there's the 2 worst categories for making a sale or marketing, that's probably in the range, right? And what I've always found is we've got to basically give it to them lock, stock, and barrel, and expect that, if I'm looking for referrals from somebody else, regardless of if I'm trying to ingratiate with taking them to parties or I'm sending them referrals or whatever, I've got to do all the work in order to facilitate it. And, for me, I'll focus on 5 or 6 things. I just had this conversation for about an hour with an advisor yesterday, which is, let's give them the complete plan and all the copy, everything else. And then we're going to invite their clients to a webinar or to a meeting. Maybe we're going to create a book that's specifically targeted for what their clients' needs are, and he's going to have 10 of them on his desk to do his pass along tools.
Right.
We're going to give you a bunch of reports on different subject matters that he can give his clients. But you go through the list of one of the ones we were talking about yesterday, and I did a podcast with a couple that are in the what do you call it, Medicare Part D or whatever insurance, and they've got a marketing system down now where they're doing 45 appointments a week.
Oh my
With a
gosh.
very high close rate. So I mean, they 150 new clients a month, and they're not doing any financial planning. So if you partnered with them, what you need is she closes the sale and puts an appointment on your calendar, and then just moves it straight from there. And one relationship like that could end up being 100 million a year in AUM done right or more. So I think that's the mistake people make. They think if I build a relationship, I communicate with them and they like me, that the CPA is going to figure out how to, send somebody business. Or if I incentivize them, you get X amount for every new client I get.
Right?
The CPA still
It's
doesn't
a
know
fine
how to-
line with compliance. You have to be careful on that
Yeah,
one.
yeah. It depends upon, your situation. But even when you do that, if you're, can structure it that way, they still aren't going to send you clients because they don't know how to do it, right?
Right. You have to provide them the tools.
Yeah.
To do that, whether it's a shareable post or a white paper or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And it really becomes, all those relationships are 99.1%, it's 99% you provide them the system, and 1%, they cooperate minimally at best to implement it.
But you also don't want to be too salesy. And one more thing too that has
Sure.
changed over the years is we always thought of referral partners and COIs as attorneys and CPAs. And then fast forward into this new world that we've evolved into, it's not just attorneys and CPAs. It can be whoever shares your same ideal client. It could be a
Exactly.
high-end jeweler, it could be a high real estate professional. Really think outside of the box. And I wrote an article with an advisor that I work with. I co-authored it for Horse's Mouth on really how to market and work with your COIs.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to provide that to you, actually, if you wanted to include that in the show notes.
Sure.
But it talks about the different COIs that could be possible referral partners for you that you might not think about, really.
Oh, absolutely. And see, there's a wide range. That's exactly right. Is if I'm targeting doctors, there's a local, state, national association
Right.
that with their specialties and so forth. So there's places to get referrals. If you're, one of my clients is a private pilot and he's targeting pilots. Well, that opens up a huge range of referral partners that have nothing to do with doing their taxes or their estate planning or anything. And you can go, on and on and on thinking about that. As you said, it's who has your target audience and how do you build a relationship? And frankly, once you get out of the attorney and CPA, mindset, it opens up the world to an incredible number of opportunities. And oftentimes people who are going to be more open than not.
Absolutely.
This is a left field example, but one of my advisor clients is, his family lineage is German. He's into Porsches. He's collecting every iteration of the turbo 911. He's got 2 or 3 of them. I think he's got 3 or 4 now. And I keep saying to him, well, we know where those guys hang out, right? So, let's do something with the dealership, and let's do something with the Porsche Club of, in this case, Colorado. Let's do something with their, day at the track days. Let's create the office where you got the glass wall, your conference room is here and the collection's over there, and you do meet, right? I mean, there's so many different places you can do it. And that's completely out of left field, but it's something where there's affinity. There's going to be an immediate relationship build, and it's extremely easy to get to them, and extremely to get to them. And like you said, in a way that's providing information, providing education, and not looking like you're trying to pitch a product.
No, and another good, absolutely. And another way that a lot of our advisors can really communicate and build those relationships with these COIs, referral partners, is offering classes for CE credit. So you're providing a service to them, they can receive their CE credit. You partner with a wholesaler who has the presentation already ready to go and can do the CE paperwork. And it's very little, and the wholesaler most often will pay for the lunch event, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You're providing a service to the in this case, it would be an attorney or CPA.
Right.
And build that relationship. So there are lots of different ways you can do that.
You bet.
Yeah.
And again, it's something where I don't know how many advisors I've talked to who said, well, that doesn't work or that didn't work. It's like, well, it's not that
They all say
work.
that
Yeah,
until
it's
we
not
start
that
working with them.
It's not that it doesn't work. It's that you didn't work it the way that, you
Right.
got to work it to make it work. And that is another foul. And it's not just advisors. I mean, so many different business owners, people in this type of role, they believe they've tried it before when they did it poorly, right? Well, I've tried LinkedIn advertising, I've tried Facebook advertising, I've tried Google, I've tried circle of influence. Those things didn't work well. And then when you start questioning, did you do this? No. Did you do this? No. Did you do this? No. Did you keep track of the numbers and know what the conversion rates were? No. I was talking to one and he's having actually pretty good success with live event marketing. But when you drill down, what he was doing is abdicating to an agency who was, being tasked with filling the room. And then when you looked at the list that they were mailing to, he couldn't figure out why his closing rate wasn't as high as it should be. But he was closing everybody who was his target audience that was in the room. And then there was a whole bunch of people who weren't the right people to be in the room. And then they had told him, well, that's as close as we can do on targeting. Because again, a lot of people, which is why, you and I work with them, right?
Right.
To focus them. A lot of people that you're contracting out to do things, they perceive, if I'm contracting out Facebook, is they believe that they're going to purely get evaluated on how many leads they get, right? The Google is purely how many leads do I get? If it's an event, promotions, direct mail or social media, how many butts are in the seats and how many registrations
Oh
do
my
they get?
gosh, I know.
Right? But that they have no concern with or even an understanding of narrowcasting the message, getting to exactly the right people. Usually the advisor hasn't sat down and said, here's the list of characteristics of people that I work with that I want in the room. They've said 50 to 60 and they have $500,000, to invest or something like that, and have done just a horrible job at targeting.
And if I can give one tip, don't prospect off a list. Don't do it because the list vendor will say, oh, this list encapsulates this net worth and this where they live. But they may not be the right, they likely aren't the right prospect for you. And that's why we spend so much time looking at your ideal client and cloning the ones that you have, because then we actually reach them where they're at. And so you will appear where they're looking. We have a client that we just recently finished a project with where he was surprised to find out that he shouldn't be marketing on Facebook. His clients are only using Facebook to post pictures of their kids so grandparents could see it. They're actually on YouTube trying to research and figure out how, everything, how to fix something, how to learn about something. And so we're doing a project where we're creating small snippets of videos on different financial topics that will appear on video on YouTube, so that when the ideal client is on YouTube for another reason, they're going to see it.
Yeah. That's a good example. Here, going back to lists for a second, is and this is out of the niche, but it's a story I heard that exemplifies it. Is, if people don't know, most of the states sell driver's license data. So you can go pull a list of everybody, and the data they have includes sex, weight, height, etc. So all the weight loss people, when this started happening, thought, hey, this is great, because, you know, their target audience is, you know, not being sexist, but it's female predominantly, and they can go pull them and compute BMI. And so basically they could sell to fat women, right? Of the right age category, you know. So I don't remember what that was, but let's say 35 to 50 of a BMI of whatever their cutoff was. Failed miserably. Absolutely failed miserably.
Shocker.
And the you know, and the missing ingredient was, you don't know if they care, right? And it's exactly what you're saying here is that you've got to have a list that not only encapsulates those demographic characteristics, but you've got to understand the psychographic of what they're looking for, what
Right.
they're researching, which is again where, you know, it for good or ill, the marketing breadth that came with the internet, certainly came with YouTube and Google, secondarily social media, of being able to go target people on what they're currently interested in and get them at a time. The old direct response version of this was the infomercial crowd.
Mhm.
And what you could do is you could buy their list of buyers, but they would sell what they call their hot list. In other words, they bought within the last week or the last month. Well, if I'm selling get rich in real estate, the best possible audience is they just spent money on get rich with real estate with somebody else. And online, you can facilitate that much more easily. Somebody on YouTube is researching this area. Your ad shows up, it drives them to more extensive information, drives them to give you information. They're searching for any one of, you know, 500 keywords that relate, and you can get in front of them. It gives you that next level of, are they interested? Are they currently hot to trot on it? Are they in the market that way?
And you know, not every advisor's next ideal client is going to be found online. It
No.
really depends on who they are and what how they're made up.
Yeah.
They could be at a networking event, or we're working with a client where the ideal clients seem to be coming to them because of a job change.
Mhm.
And they were listening to a session on what to do with their 401k. So that's not online. That is, you know, in the speaking world. So it really, if you've met one advisor, you've met one advisor, because every advisor is different and your clients are different. And that's where we work to create the marketing plan based on many different modalities that will reach the ideal client where they all are at, to differentiate that advisor from the one down the street and the one next door. Because if you're looking for an advisor or want to make the switch, and you're given material from friends, family, colleagues online, and it's all looking the same, how do you decide as a client? How do you decide? So you decide when you read something that resonates with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I sent you my book a few weeks ago. That's like chapter 1 or chapter 2 is railing against, you know, all the advisors having a contest to see who can be no different than everybody else.
And all of this goes into play with events too. So it's not just your client communication, it's your events. So if you have your ideal client in mind, and let's say you know that your ideal client are moms, well, you don't plan events during nap time or school pickup, or you do it now, you can do it online, and you don't want to do it where they have to drive far near your office because that's convenient for you.
Yeah.
And it's 45 minutes from your ideal client. Okay, you don't do that.
Especially
You wanna
through heavy
meet them where they're
traffic.
at.
Yeah.
Right. And not just the moms. I mean, whatever. I mean, if your ideal clients are working professionals, you don't hold a 3 o'clock event. You make sure you time it for, 6:30, or it's by where all the office buildings are, near the freeway, easily accessible. You really have to think of all of that. And we call that the event personality. You have to look at all the different pieces that resonate with your ideal client to hold a successful event, because if you
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
don't, then you're just throwing another great party. And it's okay to throw a great party, but you want it to be for a purpose, for a goal, to have value and build those relationships. Because when you build those relationships and you build the know, like, trust, then they're going to refer you to friends and family and adult children.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have time to get deep
Yeah.
into events, and Elise and I did that pretty thoroughly. But one of the things that I find that advisors don't get is that when it's a prospecting event. Now, this is not a client appreciation or
Right.
circle of influence thing, but when it's a prospecting event, they don't get what the trigger points are, and the companies that they abdicate to. And I use that word advisedly because they usually aren't clear on what they're trying to accomplish and delegating a piece of it. I can delegate the direct mail, I can delegate the targeting, but I got to know what I'm trying to accomplish and who I'm trying to accomplish it with. But one of the trigger points that I try to get a point across is the trigger point is when they raise their hand, not when they're in front of you at the live event. And as you shift to, say, a webinar from a dinner meeting, there's a huge difference in show rate, right? A live meeting, done right, might have a 90% show rate. A webinar, you do everything right, you get 40% show rate. But then the thing we miss on that too is on a webinar, they're checking their email and they're checking their text and they're surfing other websites, and you don't even have their full attention. At least when they're in a room, you have mostly their attention, because in a small enough room, it seems rude to be sitting there playing around on their iPhone. But I think advisors miss those 2 pieces. Is an online event isn't the same as a live face-to-face event.
No, but it does have it has a purpose. I don't mean to cut over you, but there's a space and a time, especially now, for these virtual events, and you want to use it. Yeah, you want to use it where it's meant to be. I remember when we hit the pandemic and everything went virtual, one of the biggest things I heard was, oh my gosh, I can hold an event and my top client happens to not be in my geographical area, and they're loving being able to come to these events.
Yeah.
So there is a very you have to be very purposeful on using those events to really be marketing moments and work for you.
Yeah. Well, and you touched upon something briefly, but the other thing I think is interesting with the advisor niche is somehow they get into their head that, I've got a 5-mile radius from my office and that's where my clients are. And as you get better and better at the demographic and psychographic and other elements of my audience, maybe what it is I have a very narrow slice of the overall population, but they're, it's a coast to coast, or it's all of Canada, or it's all of North America, or whatever I can do licensing wise. But they kind of miss the point that it doesn't have to be we meet face to face. Nowadays, meeting face to face with Zoom, 95% of the same experience. You miss a little bit, but it's pretty close. And I've got people I work with that, in other words, they target dentists internationally, or they have clients that are everywhere from Seattle to Miami to New Hampshire. And the more you really narrow in on that slice, rather than draw a radius and overgeneralize what you're looking for, is opening up that geography. Yeah, makes a lot of sense as well.
And I think the pandemic helped in that. It
Yeah.
helped us really bridge the different communications because, especially in the advisory world, we were chipped per se or predisposed per se to just work in our, one zip code or maybe two zip codes, and then work with the referrals that might have then helped us branch out to other areas.
Yeah.
But realizing that we don't have any boundaries now. And so we can build that relationship via Zoom. It's not 100% the same as in person,
Mhm.
but we can certainly do that. And if your service is a fit for somebody who is out of state, then they're perfect clients for you.
Yeah. Well, and depending upon how powerful and narrow your audience is, they'll come to you, right?
Absolutely. And the power of having all this technology and the social media, if you're doing it right, then your content is being forwarded.
Exactly. Exactly.
It
So
all buttons up and it all ties together. And it all boils down to you want to market to the ideal client because they'll listen, and you need to know who they are, what their preferences are, what their not only demographics, psychographics, and life circumstances. And when I say life circumstances, are they coming to you? You may say your ideal client, oh, they're just about to retire. Well, they came to you 20 years ago when they were putting their children through college.
yeah.
That's who you want to reach.
Oh
So
yeah.
you really
Yeah.
have to know all of that, the whole picture. And then it's just, it works. It
Yeah.
really works.
Well, one of the marketing gurus I've worked with for many years now is he uses the terminology, you want to go from annoying pest to welcome guest. And part of the way you do that, again, to quote somebody from I think the 30s, is we would talk about you want to get inside the conversation already going on in your head. And most marketing messages are ignored or annoying because there's a mismatch between me talking about myself, trying to get you interested, versus I'm matching that conversation and hitting the right point. And again, as you're saying, the more clearly you get an idea of exactly who it is you're targeting, exactly who it is you work with, the more clearly you understand their needs, desires, fears, and so forth, then you can craft the message to really target in. And it's again where I see, the stuff that, not to be critical of any of them, but Mass Mutual, Northwestern Mutual, and Merrill Lynch. I mean, they're all doing things that are so mass market that nobody cares about the message. It just doesn't resonate with anyone, rather than get inside the conversation that's going on in their head, showing them that you have a solution to their problem. It's all my other bitch about advisors, going back to LinkedIn, is every one of them has all of the damn alphabet soup. They're CHSC, there's TFP, they're RICP, there's I think I Googled it. There's like 84 of them. And I know what most of it means. I don't care. And I got to tell you, their prospective clients could care less, right? And I know the CFP board buys advertising, go find the CFP. Nobody knows, nobody cares. It's irrelevant. And so what they try to do is try to use that to pitch, rather than really getting deep into what the target audience is looking for. And it's fine to have the credentials on the back end. If they click with you, know, like, and respect you, as it's one other element of credibility, and you can show that, but it's not the thing that's going to get them in your pipeline and get them face to face with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that the advisors listening now, it's like, how do I do that? It was great. How do I target my ideal client? Well, the first place, and this is what we do as a third party, but you can do it yourself. You may not get a lot of the same answers, but you survey your clients, you ask them in your meetings, you have a questionnaire, you learn about them, and then you map it all out and you look for the commonalities. You really do.
Yeah.
And you build that avatar.
It is. You and I talked
That's where
about
you
this.
start.
It is interesting. You and I talked about this before, how hard it is for advisors to step back and look at their client list with any level of objectivity. I don't know how many times I've been told, after telling them to do exactly what you said, is, oh, it's all over the board. There's no commonality. Well, how about this? How many of you, rounded up over the years? Couple of them that I've worked with, it's like 650-ish. Well, okay. How about if we took the top 100 that you like working with, that really like working with you, that have, are making you most of the money, and figure out what's common about them. And maybe it's not career, maybe it's, maybe there's a spectrum of age, whatever it might be. What's common? What do you have in common? What do you like about them? Because again, the last thing you want to do is round up a bunch of clients that you don't like, right? You don't want to.
Absolutely. Well, we see that now with, we work with advisors who are usually mid-career, and the first thing we hear is, I want to work with clients that I like. I don't
Yeah.
need to work with everybody who fogs the mirror at this point in my career. I just don't.
Yeah.
So it's really, setting yourself up for the next half of your career. And we even work with newer advisors, set yourself up from the beginning with clients that are like you, that you like, that you want to work with.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and desperation comes from a lack of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So if I've got 50, perfect prospects coming through my pipeline, I can be picky. But if I'm lucky to get one or two a month or a week, then I feel like I have to make every sale. So to a great extent, targeting the right audience and opening the spigot makes a huge difference. Hey, we've got a little over
Absolutely.
our what we
Oh
expected
my
to do here.
goodness.
Yeah,
Time
we're
flies
almost
when
at
you're
an
having
hour
fun,
here.
doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I hope I could provide some value to the listeners.
I think
because
it's been great, Angela. We could talk about these topics for 8 hours. I don't think anybody would want to still be listening,
I
on
know we have
subject.
nobody who's on the who's
Yeah,
looking.
yeah. But
Well, thank you for
anything to
having
add
me.
before we wrap up? We're going to have all your contact information.
Absolutely.
Uh,
They can follow us on LinkedIn, Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors. We post tips and ideas and what we're seeing in the marketplace. That's a great way to kind of hear what's, are you pulling it up?
yeah,
That's my
there's your
LinkedIn.
personal. Yeah.
That's my personal LinkedIn. You're welcome to connect with me there. And then Custom Strategic Marketing for Wealth Advisors is the business that I'm doing with Elise Stoner, who was on a couple of days ago,
Yeah.
where we do everything we were talking about, work with the ideal client, analyze your ideal client, develop the marketing plan. You can also email us if you have questions. I know you probably have lots of burning questions. And we just don't know where to start. Strategic marketing for advisors at gmail.com.
Mhm.
And then I know Elise mentioned this as well. For your listeners, we're happy to provide a discount on our marketing coaching and consulting, which is another piece of our signature service is the marketing plan. But we also work with advisors that either need another ear, or they have all these ideas, they don't know where to start. We're happy to provide some marketing consulting and coaching on an hourly basis, and we provide a discount for your listeners.
Yeah, and some people will listen to this conversation and say, well, it sounds like you both are kind of in the same business, why are you promoting the competition on either way? And I never look at it that way. I was saying to Elise, is high performers are always looking for the slight edge. And so they're looking for the best specialty in each one of those. And as we talked before, I always start with a new client on if they have any flexibility on their pricing and what
Right.
they're doing there on their sales conversion process, and then kind of the tactics of opening the spigot. One of the things I always try to get them to do is what you do for them is, and I freely admit I very rarely
Right.
get them to do it or do it well, is to really go through their client list and get a good analysis of who it is they really are working with already and and by the way, they miss the opportunity there as well. That's a different conversation.
It's beyond just looking at the list. It's actually having those conversations with
Yeah.
with the clients. And we talked about this before. So we work in similar sandboxes, but completely different. So you work on, different areas of a practice that we don't, and we're firm believers that we stay in our lane. We do marketing, strategic marketing planning and event planning and the coaching and the different pieces that go under that umbrella.
Yeah.
We're not, we don't do SOPs, we don't do HR, we don't do operations, we don't do blog writing, SEO, digital marketing, but we know people in that space. So another change from 25 years ago is all of the different partners, we all work together. We all want to provide our knowledge that we have accumulated over the years and support each other because we can support the advisor in the best way possible. We don't look at it as competition.
I've not too charitably publicly called the explosion of consultants. It's kind of the bozo explosion, but what the bozos are the ones who pitch that they have the one bright shiny object that's going to solve all the problems. We all know that automating LinkedIn contacting works fine. It's not going to solve all your problems. Facebook advertising or effective direct mail to fill them. All of it is necessary. You need to delegate those pieces. You need to first know the overall plan on what you're looking for. But the people who miss the boat are the ones who try to sell an advisor the bright shiny object as a solution to all their problems. And the clients we work with them long term. But what we find is at every level in their career development, they have a different issue, right? At the highest level, your problem is getting things done through people. And
Yep.
most of them are just horrible at management, horrible at leadership, horrible at people training. And at the lowest level, it's having enough new prospects coming into the right group and having a good closing ratio. And then, not giving away things. Again, independents, if they're not charging a planning fee, they're not charging a substantial planning fee, they're not building the relationship long term, then they just end up, churn and burn and really not making much of an income.
And there's not one size fits all vendor. I mean, you do need to look at working with a business coach, possibly an HR, depending on
Yeah.
how big your firm is, and then marketing. You really need to diversify because it is not one vendor fits all. It's just not. And if you find one that says they do it all, they're probably not doing a very good job.
They probably do most of it for you. Yeah, we tend to farm people out to here's somebody who can do SEO for you really well. And we can give you the template, but here's what your website's supposed to be like.
Right.
And here's somebody who can do LinkedIn, Facebook advertising for you. And here's somebody who can handle the direct mail as long as we put together the target, et cetera. But most advisors don't even know where to start on who they should be talking to, what they should be doing.
I'm happy to point them in the right direction.
Well, Angela, we'll have all your contact
Thank
information in there.
you
I'd love to
very
have feedback
much.
on the book. And
Oh, I'd love it. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
it was great. I read most of it. So you're right on. It's all very targeted, and it really pulls behind the curtain as to kind of all the different pieces that you need to be looking at. From ideal client to attracting the right person at the at your events, to you delved in some operation pieces as well. It was a very good read.
It's I was talking to Dan Caprell, who's also in our niche doing marketing consulting, and he said, well, it's a damn encyclopedia. He said
it is a textbook.
Yeah.
It showed up. I go, what's this?
Yeah.
But it's an easy read.
There's a lot of books that are, especially books done for advisors, that are really a sales letter. This one particularly, I intended it for, the chief marketing officer of the big companies, and one thing or another as something pretty substantial. But what I find is, whether it's the marketing program we sell or it's the book, that companion piece, really, once an advisor goes through all that, they may have an image of what should be done, but they don't know how to do it. And then it takes somebody like you or me to fill the holes in. Well, great. Thank you very much. We'll see if we can.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.